Welcome guys, it's Andy here from D6 Evolution, and it's time for our Salamanders Codex review. Now, the aim behind these reviews is a little bit different than our normal reviews on the channel. We're going to be doing shorter reviews, and it's aimed to give you a really condensed review of what is competitive on the in the codex, as well as I'm going to put up on the screen what all the rules are as I go along, so that if you want a little bit more depth on things, it's there on the screen for you to read. Now, anyone who's new to the channel, D6 Evolution, we're all about 40k tactics, so if it's your first time on the channel and you like what you're seeing, remember to subscribe. Now, on with the Salamanders review. So, I think this codex, again, is another super powerful Space Marine codex out of GW. It's actually really, really cool, and as you go through, we're going to see that all the stratagems are awesome, and it's going to revolve around mainly flamers and melters, and it's I guess at the end of the day it's trying to find a way to use both of those weapons, because they're not the most super useful things in 40k. So let's take a dive in. So the Salamanders generic chapter tactic, for anyone who doesn't know, is they ignore -1 AP weapons, which in some games is going to be awesome. And the second thing they do, which is Master Artisan, which is they get 1 reroll to hit and wound per unit. So this really, really favours MSU style play, attack bikes, weapons with one shot, such as like a hunter with a unit with 1 last cannon in, something like that, and then it means that 1 heavy weapon is getting a full reroll to hit and wound, so it's perfect. So again, a really strong chapter tactic there. Now, their bonuses for going pure. Now, this is a big one. They get +1 to wound on flamer and melter weapons. Whew. That's really nice. That isn't tied to any particular doctrines or anything else. You just get +1 to wound, which is super, super strong. And as you can see, when we go through this codex, you can see that there's multiple ways to stack, increased damage, some crazy things, particularly on the flamers there, to make that chapter tactic really, really worthwhile. So let's take a dive in. Let's talk about the special characters first of all. Vulcan. Let's talk about Vulcan, because he is awesome. Now, he's only infantry, which is probably his only downside to he is slow moving, but he gives full rerolls to hit and to wound for flamer and melter weapons. That is amazing. So if you're going to be building your list around flamers and melters, which you probably should if you're running Salamanders, he's really, really cool. He also has a 3-up invulnerable save, and he gets buffed up to strength 8 in combat with his little weapon if you take him as a warlord. So Vulcan, big win there, 130 points. The other special character, I'm not such a fan of, to be honest. He's 140 points. His name is Adrax Agatone. Now, honestly, he's ultra durable. He's 6 wounds. You reduce the damage by 1 when things are attacking him, which is something which you are seeing a lot in the new Space Marine Codex. I don't know why it wasn't an aura buff. It's almost like they had problems with that with Iron Hands. And effectively, he gives rerolls to 1 to hit, but his big thing is he gives rerolls. He gives +1 to wound in combat, which is, as an aura, it's kind of okay, but on a 6-inch moving guy, it's probably not worth it, because you're never going to get him into combat. The other character to talk about is you've got Forge World Dreadnought. I think his name is Brea Ashmantle. He's toughness 9 Dreadnought, but he's like over 400 points. With Warlord Traits, you could make him toughness 11. Just because you could, which is utterly ridiculous. But I think at over 400 points, he's so not worth it. Okay, so let's talk about the Warlord Traits as I like. I'm going to put all the Warlord Traits up on the screen here just so you guys can have a look at them, but the ones I really like are Anvil of Strength, so +2 to your strength. Now, because strength modifiers of the model happen before you add on the weapons, so you're getting a strength 6 character. Then if he takes a Power Fist or a Thunder Hammer, he becomes strength 12, because that's how GW work out their character stats. So that is really, really nice. You could also do +2 toughness to a character, as I've already alluded. And again, you can start seeing how this can really stack with some of the traits later on in the book. So if you can put if you get a guy in Gravis armor or something with strength or on a bike, so it'd be toughness 5, +2 toughness would be 7. You've also got a relic for -1 to wound. So then he's toughness 7 with a -1 to wound. You've got a psychic power, which could make him toughness 8 because +1 toughness, and you've got another psychic power for -1 to wound. So you can see how you can stack a lot of buffs on some of these characters, and you can make them pretty darn hard to kill. The other big one, which I think is probably worth talking about, is reroll number of hits with your flamer weapons. So if you're going to be running maxed out flamer aggressors or something like that, this is a big win, obviously. There are other ways to max out your flamer hits, apart from just re-rolling the number of hits, as we're going to go on to later. But I think if you're running heavy flamers, if you're running a lot of flamers, then this is really cool. But realistically, I think the better option is to run Vulcan for re-rolling hits and wounds, which I think is better. So let's talk about the relics. Again, there's some quite cool little relics in there which I want to touch on. Again, I'll put all the relics up on the screen so you can see them. I really like Drake's Smiter. Why? Because it's funny. Essentially, it's a Thunder Hammer where you do double damage on the rolls of a 6. So a roll of a 6, you get 6 damage, which is utterly ridiculous. The other ones which are nice, you've got a -1 to wound relic, which I've gone over already, which is really cool, particularly when you can stack it with +2 to toughness. You've got a psychic power for +1 to toughness. You can get a -1 to hit. You've got the Promethean plate, which is a wound roll of 1 to 3 fails. Again, we're starting to see this a lot in books. I think that's quite cool. It's particularly on characters which can be wounded on low wound rolls. I think that's quite a nice one to take as well. And it doesn't stack so well with the increased toughness things, because then naturally you wouldn't be wounded on a roll of 1 to 3 anyway. So it's something to take instead of the plus toughness, I think. And the other really cool one is the 12-inch Flamer, which is 2 damage apiece. Yeah, I think that's awesome, particularly when you can max out your Flamer hits on that. You're going to be doing some awesome damage. Right, so let's talk about the stratagems in this book, and these stratagems are super strong. And most of them, as you're going to see, are going to be building on that +1 to wound for Flamer and Melter weapons. But there's some super strong... all the stratagems in this book are super, super strong. I was originally just going to pick a few, then I read through the whole thing. I was like, this whole thing is just crazy. So let's build it up. Let's start with the shooting phase stratagems first. So the first one to talk about is Flamecraft. Flamecraft is epic. 2 CP, you can get max out your Flamer hits. So if you imagine a group of Flamer aggressors which didn't move, I know it's pretty hard to get those guys into range, but you're going to max out the Flamer hits, or more realistically, 3 land speeders with dual heavy Flamers, they'll get 36 auto hits. So that's super strong. That's super strong straight off the bat. When you combine it with Vulcan, so if you ever manage to get Vulcan in position, then you'd be re-rolling wound with your Flamers as well. So I think a lot of the stratagems on the book really buff when you can max out your Flamer hits. The next one we're going to talk about is Crucible of Battle. So this is just a straight up +1 to wound. Pretty much no stipulations on this one. So I think this is really odd. It's almost like they've written half a stratagem, because like other things like Imperial Fist, they have to 2 CP, they get +1 to wound. And it's only specifically against one single vehicle in your opponent's army. This is just +1 to wound. Go for it. For half the cost. So it's not even like, you can do it on a vehicle, you can do it on a fire raptor, you can do it on whatever you want. It's really weird why they've written it this way. But if you're a Salamanders player, I guess you're going to be happy with this. Next one is Fires of Battle. Now, this is a standout stratagem in the book, and one of my sort of top 3 stratagems in this book. That essentially, on a 4+ to wound with a Flamer weapon, you do mortal wounds. So if you think you can only do it on one model, so say your Flamer aggressor, which has stood still, this is the dream with this one, you do the 2 CP stratagem to give him max hits, so he gets 24 hits. That means you're going to, on average, get 12 mortal wounds. If you've got Vulcan next to him, you're going to be getting a lot more wounds than that, because he'll re-roll the wounds. So you've got the potential here to get an obscene amount of mortal wounds off against anything in the game, which is amazing, because we're starting to see a lot more ultra durable things like Iron Hands with their Iron Stone. The ability just to completely bypass damage, modification, and vulnerable saves is huge. It's absolutely huge. Now, even if you just use it on like a tactical war suit with its 2d6 flamer, you're still going to be getting on average 6 mortal wounds if you max out that flamer hits, or on a land speeder or something like that. So the ability to reliably deal out mortal wounds is absolutely huge. Now, unfortunately, it's all an unmodified 4 to do mortal wounds, because otherwise your +2 to wound would make this thing utterly broken. I don't know why they didn't do that. So the next one, which I want to talk about, is immolation protocol. So in your shooting phase, for 1 CP, again, this is kind of like the Imperial Fist ones, but it costs half the cost. So for 1 CP, all your flamer weapons become pistol weapons. So if you get trapped in combat with your tactical war suits or your flamers, your aggressor flamers, all of a sudden you can shoot into combat, which is utterly ludicrous. And then, you can throw on some mortal wounds as well, because why not? The other thing to mention in Fires of Battle for the mortal wounds is it works in Overwatch as well. So again, you can see the shooting phase stratagems, they are ridiculous when you look at flamer weapons. And even just that +1 to wound, that stratagem by itself, amazing. Now, there is one other stratagem to talk about in this book for the shooting phase. Now, this is probably the most broken stratagem I've seen in a long time, and it's probably going to need some sort of fixing, because it's going to it just messes up so many mechanics in the book. It's only on infantry, and it's called self-sacrifice. And essentially what you do here is you nominate a Salamander's infantry model, like infantry unit. So it could be a character, or not. And you do it at the start of your opponent's shooting phase. So your opponent has to plan for this in his movement phase, because he doesn't know which one you're going to do this on. So you nominate a unit, and any other infantry units within 6, not wholly within 6, within 6, can't be targeted unless they're both the closest and visible. So you could hide a Salamander's character out of line of sight in a building, and your opponent's gun line can't shoot anything else, as long as all your models tail back to 6 of it. And that character, it could be +2 toughness, you can make him +3 toughness, you can make him -1 to hit, you can make him -1 to wound as well. And you can see all of a sudden how you've got this unkillable Salamander's character, or you could just do it on a bunch of Storm Shield, Thunderhammer Terminators, and all of a sudden nothing else in their army can be shot. I think that is utterly crazy. They didn't actually key it to the Salamander's keyword either. So it has to be a Salamander's unit you put it on, but then it's just all other infantry in the game in your army can't be targeted. So, you could have an Imperial Fist gun line behind it. You could have an AdMech gun line behind this. It is going to need some big changes. I probably wouldn't build your army around it, because this is something which I see changing probably quite quickly, because otherwise it needs a lot more thought, this stratagem, because otherwise it's just going to be really, really dumb. Other ones to talk about for the shooting phase, you can get a relentless determination. The big thing about this one essentially is it lets you stay still. It counts as if you're staying still. So those flamer aggressors, you can't advance with this one, but you can move normally. But it just means that they still get their bonuses for staying still, even if the flamer aggressors move. So it just increases that flamer range as well. So that's really nice. And the other one is stand your ground. So +1 to save against damage 1 weapons, which again is really, really nice, as long as you didn't advance in the previous phase. And I think that goes really well with the -1 AP shooting, ignoring -1 AP shooting as well. So they're the shooting ones. I think the shooting ones for Salamanders are ridiculously good, particularly the +1 to wound. They're making your whole army untargetable, because that was a good idea. And the ability to put out reliable mortal wounds. Brilliant. So the assault-based ones, they're also super, super strong as well. Okay, so let's talk about the assault phase stratagems. And again, super, super strong here. So first one is Strength of the Primarch. This does 2 things. First of all, it does +1 to your strength characteristic of the model. So this is huge, because this happens before you factor in things like Power Fist. So your aggressors will now be Strength 5, so their Power Fist will therefore become Strength 10. And also, just because that wasn't enough, you get you're going to get double damage on 6s as well, which is ridiculous, and it costs 1 CP. The next one to talk about is Born Protectors. Now this one's quite a complicated little stratagem here. So you get to, when your opponent declares a charge on you, another model within 12 of your unit which your opponent declared a charge on can Overwatch. Which it doesn't specify whether it's infantry, so you could Overwatch with a Fire Raptor or a giant vehicle as well, or your Flamer Aggressors and throw on those mortal wounds, just because you can. After you do that, you can heroically intervene up to 2d6, but you must end closer to the model which charged. Now, I'm not sure if that removes the restriction of normal heroic intervention, so you may still have to end your move closer to the closest model, as well as trying to get closer to the model which charged as well. So it's a little bit of an odd one there. Again, super strong. This one costs 2 command points though. So it's good to know they're doing things for more than 1 command point. Next one to talk about is Rise from the Ashes. Not necessarily a assault phase 1 in particular, but another super strong one. Essentially, a character can get back up on a 4+, and it's at the end of the phase, which again, as we all know from playing Tyrannus Knights and things like that, getting up at the end of the phase is super annoying, because it means that unless you've got something which also acts at the end of the phase, that character can get back up, and you can't shoot it again or assault it again. Okay, so let's talk about the Psychic Tree, the Promethean Discipline. There's 2 powers that I want to talk about here, which are quite good. The rest is kind of a little bit average. I'm probably not going to talk about it too much. I'm going to put all of the traits up on the Psychic powers up on screen there, so you can quickly look through them as I'm talking about it. But let's talk about Fire Shield. Now, -1 to hit power. You can put it on anything you like in the Salamanders Codex. There's no stipulations. -1 to hit, and you're also -1 to charge. And the other one I want to talk about is Drakeskin, +1 toughness. Which again, warp charge 6, it's nice that they keep all these things consistent. +1 toughness on a unit, again, is huge. And you can see, when you're already getting -1 to wound on a Warlord, you can get +2 toughness on a Warlord as well. You can get -1 to hit. You can see how quickly you can really, really stack the buffs with this Psychic Tree. I probably wouldn't bother with any of the Psychic powers. They're not very good, but those 2, they're standouts. They're really good, and the warp charge value's pretty reasonable on them as well. Salamanders then, super strong codex, amazing, really cool little stratagems in there as well. I think the main difficulty here is if you're building around flamers and melters, they're not the best weapons in the game, and they're actually incredibly hard to find units which can realistically use those abilities well. A bunch of Devastators in a drop pod with melters next to Vulcan. It's certainly going to be good, but that's a lot of points put into that. You could use the 3 land speeders, just over 200 points for that with dual heavy flamers. Because you get 3, you get the movement goes up to 20. In turn 1, they'll be in Devastator Doctrine, so there'd be the heavy flamers would be -2 AP. You can max out the flamer hits. One of them could do mortal wounds as well. So you'd on average get 6 mortal wounds. You'd max out your flamer hits as well, and you'd get +1 to wound with your flamers. You could even make them +2, if you use the other stratagem as well. The only problem with that unit is it's not particularly survivable. You have a stratagem in the Space Marine Codex that if your unit of land speeders, you can put it on it for 2 CP, which would become a 4-up invulnerable save. So you could boost that forwards turn 1, you could put it in front of your opponent's line, you could utterly obliterate a couple of units with that, and then it means your opponent has to deal with it next turn. It's going to have a 4-up invulnerable save to shooting, and it's going to be realistically quite hard to charge, because if you get within 8 inches of it, you're just dead basically if you try and charge it within 8 inches of flamer range, unless you've got some ignore Overwatch. So I think that could be quite cool, but if you don't get first turn, those land speeders are going to die pretty quickly. Other things, obviously, flamer aggressors. If you can get them into range, particularly if you get them into a double firing range, they're going to be super, super good. The ability to move them and count as being stationary is going to really help with that unit as well, for the 1 CP stratagem. If you get them into range, they're going to kill anything in the game with the amount of mortal wounds those guys can put out. So I think they're the 2 really cool builds there. The +1 to wound stratagem, just being generically on anything in the Salamanders Codex, is actually really cool as well. Or you could just run your Salamanders, just MSU style attack bikes with melters and things like that. You know, again, that's a valid option. Or things like hunters. We saw in the recent LGT how those hunter tanks, they're super strong. So I think, you know, you could just play around the master artisan trait. And of course, if you didn't want to go pure Salamanders, you could soup it up. And I think particularly that self-sacrifice stratagem, as it stands at the moment, you know, you could mix in the Salamanders at the front with Admech behind it, or, you know, Deathwatch, whatever your flavour is, you know, Imperial Fist Gunline with the Centurion Devastators in there. There's going to be some really, really cool little combos you can get in there. So there we have it. That is my review of the Salamanders. I really, really like this book. This is really cool. And if you haven't seen our Imperial Fist review yet, be sure to check that out. And remember, guys, let me know what you think about these new shorter reviews. If it's something you like, or whether you want a bit more information on things, comment in the comments below. And if you've seen any combos that I've not seen yet, again, let me know. Right, take care, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.